today's discussion is going to be focused on the future of workspaces in Pakistan. How I'm really interested in diving into how these spaces can be made more inclusive and how they have made access to offices and access to workspaces more democratic for smaller businesses. Anyhow, our panelists include Fatima from Labs. She's the Chief Operating Officer there. Wasay from Popcorn Studios. Mannan, who is not, actually he's the only panelist who does not operate a co-working space, but is actually a user. And I think that perspective is very important.
User, not loser, right?
I did say user with a U. And then we have Hassan from Kickstart, and then of course Saad from Daftar Kwan. So starting with Fatima, so out of all these co-working spaces, only 2 have actually raised capital from, say, some institutional means. And this question is both for Fatima and Saad. How do you guys see the future of co-working spaces in Pakistan? What were the narratives, or what was the interest behind whoever your investors are also both different backgrounds? So starting with Fatima, when you're raising venture capital, what was the narrative, or what was the idea that the venture investors were interested in investing in this space?
Am I allowed to say that? You're my legal counsel.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So look, I joined Labs because I saw an opportunity, and I got really excited about the fact that we have all these startups sitting. And you know, as I came to Labs, I wasn't there to work at Labs. I got an office at Labs. That's how it started. And I had all these startups coming up to me for advice. And I kept thinking and talking to Omar, and I said, listen, we should do something about these startups. We should introduce them to somebody. We should, maybe, I knew somebody that needed to get hired. So I was like, why don't we just hire somebody for them? And so that's where the idea started brewing. It was already in Omar's mind that we want to be a community. So what we decided to do was we wanted to be a community, and we wanted to be somebody that enables startups to do better and have help. So I wanted the founders and the teams to focus on the actual business and not have to worry about accounting services, HR policies, or hiring people, or like registering a company. I wanted them to focus on their core business, raising funding. And so the narrative that we had was, listen, why don't you come to Labs? It's a one-stop shop where you focus on your business and we'll focus on everything else. So how we were able to raise venture funding, or the idea that got people excited, was one of our initiatives called Co-Grow, where we would do a lot of mentoring, conferences, and a lot of like connecting of communities together. And the other one is business solutions, where we provide them some business solutions as a SaaS product, or you know, as any product, so that they can focus on their business. And that's how we were able to raise funding. And that is what got me excited, and a lot of other people excited joining Labs and the mission. To enable and build a community and an ecosystem for the Pakistani startups.
No, that's helpful, and I can see how it makes sense for venture capitalists or VC money to be interested in more of a SaaS play, given its scalability and low capex. But so Saad, in your venture fundraising conversations, and you guys did not raise from, say, institutional VCs, but a VC-backed or initially a VC-backed company, Amin. How are those conversations, and how does Amin, or how do you view your partnership with those guys going forward?
So I mean, it's actually really interesting, because although, like you said, the nature of the investor, the VC, is very, very different. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, I think we're just kind of approaching the same solution through different paths. And the narratives might change, but at the end of the day, I think it really just boils down to the fundamentals, really. And I think like within the ecosystem or within the context, what you're really kind of looking for, regardless of whether you're a corporate VC looking for a strategic investment, or whether you're a venture capitalist kind of looking for growth, is, are you solving a problem that is actually a problem, right? And you know, you can kind of sex it up by saying product market fit, that people are willing to kind of pay for it. And that's really what it is. And so if you look at like the international ecosystem as well, you see infrastructure as well as services and quality mentorship, quality guidance and direction as being like a major challenge for a lot of founders, regardless of whether they're like, you know, very mature companies, enterprise clients, or whether there's, you know, just a solo founder with his coffee and his MacBook, just kind of starting out. You really need that direction, and you really need someone to kind of step in and through different lenses and through different dimensions, kind of solving your other problems for you. So basically, like if you just kind of abstract the whole concept, it's basically like a very real means of noise reduction. And infrastructure, unfortunately, is not a solved problem in Pakistan. Like there's lots of ifs and buts. There's just so much unforeseen in terms of costs and capital and in terms of energy as well. And that I think kind of really made sense for the people that we were talking to as well. And that's really, what makes sense for pretty much anyone who kind of looks at it, regardless of whether they're looking at it strategically or purely from a growth standpoint. So the conversation's fairly similar.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, and that brings me to just understanding in terms of how big the market is for co-working spaces or flexible office spaces. So Hassan, when you guys are starting Kickstarter, and you're the only one of the players who has presence in Karachi as well so far, when you guys were starting off, given the existence of other players, how did you approach this market? Did it feel saturated at any point? Does it feel like it's still growing? Just wanted to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so we started at a very early stage. Our first location was actually the first co-working space in Lahore. And then right after that, the Popcorn started, and then Popcorn started, and we were almost, it was similar time, but at that time, the culture of co-working space was completely non-existent. So people did not even know what a co-working space is, how it functions. People had no idea how they could use it. And at that time, I still remember the people had, they had a lot of fear that they would be sharing space with other businesses. So how would they protect their IPs and their business knowledge and stuff like that? So at that, it's a lot different now. At that time, the market was, it was completely, there was no player, and it was completely free. So as of right now, there are several single location co-working spaces, and then there are a lot of brands as well who are offering multiple locations in different cities. As of right now, even today, I don't think that market has saturated, or it's not even nearly close to saturation. Because so far, I think the overall market size, for if we combine all the co-working spaces, it would be around 5,000 to 7,000 seats. And I think this can grow up to 20 to 25,000 seats in the coming 2-3 years. It depends how co-working spaces will keep adding locations and how startups perform in this industry. But I don't think the market is close to saturation as of right now. But when we started, it was completely market
it was new, like you still
empty,
yeah. So Mannan, coming to the startup perspective around co-working spaces, and as a user, you can take mine after this. It's okay. So coming to a user's perspective, how do you make this decision around having your own office or moving into the co-working, and what do you feel are some of the main core advantages of being in a space and sharing that office? Like Hassan said, some people were scared that we don't want to share it with a potential competitor or just generally share office space. So how do you guys actually make that decision?
Yeah, so, and I have something to add to the size of the co-working space also. So let's take a step back. At the end of the day, I think most co-working places have started targeting the startups as a customer archetype. And over there, at the end of the day, the founders have like limited time every week, right? Office space is something that larger companies compete over. Like mujhe yaad hai, when I was doing my masters, we used to go to friends' offices, Google ka bhi, PayPal ka bhi, right? और यहाँ पे ये बहुत बड़ा मसला था. You want a certain standard of an office space. Washrooms clean होने चाहिए, generator चल रहा होना चाहिए, कोई जो fraud वाले बंदे आ जाते हैं उनके लिए security चल रही होनी चाहिए. Harassment issues के around. I know Daftar actually helps out with that also, right? So security वगैरह. So startup founders, do you want to start spending like, I don't know, 4 to 8 hours a week, which I did initially, right? Figuring a lot of these things out. Like my challenges, my training at Stanford did not teach me कि generator जो है वो कैसे पकड़ना है और ख़राब हो जाए तो फिर क्या करना है और पाकिस्तान में लाहौर तो ये सारी चीज़ें if they're taken care of, we really can focus on stuff. अब थोड़े larger offices की तरफ चले जाएं, right? So as we grew, and I think we've grown more with Dr. Khan during the COVID period, we became remote first. Sorry if I'm losing track of the question, but what I'm trying to get to is, I had this discussion with our CFO. I was like, if we were to run an office of a certain standard, which companies are very particular about, that take ownership on कि जी हमारा office इस तरह की look and feel होनी चाहिए, ये वो, right? But all companies want that. So and then you have specialists who will start offering that space. Co-working space का मतलब ये नहीं है कि एक ही floor पे सारे एक ही office में करें. It can also mean building है और पूरी building शायद ये दो companies share कर रही हैं. It's powered by someone who specializes in any one of these, right? When you start looking at the costs, because you'll have to hire such people as on the stage, तो मेरा ख्याल है बढ़ने लग जाएंगी from what you can get. So there's a nice win-win that these guys have carved out. So perhaps the market is all office space in the world, beginning with Pakistan.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Wasay, in terms of how you guys ensure that the founders, who clearly the biggest USP for them is less headache and less time of theirs going, what are some of the key things that you guys try to generally make sure that saves the founders time, or how do you add that additional value that separates your offering from the rest?
So you were talking about the fact that what sort of services that we provide that the founder is going to give a preference to the co-working as compared to their own office, right?
No, or just one co-working over the other.
One co-working over the other.
Either one, yeah.
Yeah. So basically the thing is, first of all, as they were mentioning, I would like to talk about the fact that co-working is going to grow. I was reading this case study the other day, and it said that the co-working is going to grow 158% till 2024. So I don't think so the market is going to be saturated. Secondly, when it comes to the people, the best thing about working in a co-working is that if founder is opting for a co-working space, they don't have to care about all these things like internet, generator, and all this stuff that they were talking about. And they can actually focus on their core product. So even if you're saving money, opting for your own office, but still you will not be as productive as you can be in a co-working space. So I feel like if working in a co-working space, especially in a diverse environment, so like I am also the country head for Isaac. So we basically provide international talent in different countries, in different companies as well. We're going to provide some for collabs as well in the next month. So in that way, like I've been seeing that when we had an attendance of 65 to 70% of the companies that were working in Popcorn Studio. But when we brought international diverse talent there as well, even they were not interacting with them, they were just sitting there. Just because of their presence, the attendance started to increase here. So like working in a co-working space is not only about saving costs, it's about people doing contextual performance instead of the task performance. Like people go outside their box, people are spending more time there. So co-working can help you in that regard as well.
No, and this is something that I really want to speak to Saad and Hassan about. They've been in this business, I think, the longest. Have you seen these kind of, say, synergies emerge just because people are working together in the same proximity? If any particular examples?
Yeah, we have a lot of examples where people have collaborated and they have built great companies. Remote base, I often mention that is an example. The two founders, Talha and Qasim, they met at Kickstart. This was the first ever Kickstart location. That's how we got this idea that when we set up a space where different people from different backgrounds are coming and they are young and they are enthusiastic and they want to build and create things. So such platforms, co-working spaces, they are ideal for such people because they help them connect and they help them find resources. So when Talha and Qasim, in fact, at that time, Qasim was working on another company called Campus Feed. It was an anonymous chatting platform, and Talha was working on a real estate startup. They both left their companies and joined hands for remote base, which has raised a good amount of funding, and it's doing pretty well among all the startups in Pakistan. So both Talha and Qasim and their journey, they motivated us to create more spaces like these so that we can help enthusiastic and talented people meet each other, and so that they can find good resources as well. So this was that's how we started scaling our business, by looking at the examples, how people are meeting and how they are they are getting good opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of echo what Hassan's already said, I think initially, at least for us, I don't know about these guys or about everyone else, but at least for us, this was like a, simple real estate meets services problem that we were solving back in 2016. और वो भी बड़ा tentatively कि यार पता नहीं वही कि कोई किसके साथ बैठ के काम करेगा नहीं करेगा, will they like it, will they not like it. But I think very early on, वो serendipity started kicking in and so frequently. क्योंकि the interesting thing also at that particular point in time was because it was such a new phenomena that like the people that were generally gravitating towards co-working spaces and towards incubators and accelerators as well. Like, the first lot that you saw to, come out of different incubators, accelerators, still rock stars, right? Because they were kind of internally wired to be first movers and explorers and adventurers and kind of, looking at something different. So when you put a bunch of those people together, like, I don't know if I can say this, but crazy shit happens, right? Yeah. So, and then, things just kind of go from one thing to another. So, like, again, just to kind of echo what Hassan's already outlined, we've seen product acquisitions happening within the space. Koi ek product bana raha hai, someone else, Eat Mubarak is working on that space, they acquire the product, use it as a plugin. These types of things have happened. Acqui hiring all the time, managed services absolutely all the time, probably happening right now as we speak. But then also over time, I feel like we also chanced upon an interesting kind of observation at our end that it's a very interesting vantage point to be selling shovels in the gold rush, and everybody's talking to you. So startups are talking to you about talent, and they're talking to you about capital. Investors are talking to you about deal flow. And then you're just kind of sitting there wondering, it takes you some time to kind of figure out, why is this guy also looking for this guy? And this person is also looking for this company, but they're not, like, how can I, So just kind of connect the two. So over time, we've started kind of working on formalizing those curatorial, serendipitous type of, interactions as well. We've been working very hard for the last couple of years on working on a platform that we call the VCX, where we kind of, again, very finely curate, because we have a very interesting vantage point, and, all of us have a very interesting view on who a person is, what their team is, how they're doing, what space they're working in, and then the same thing on the other side as well, what funds are doing well, what funds are looking for who, and what type of an activity, et cetera, et cetera. So you look at, the investor side, you look at the services side, infrastructure, obviously, and then, you start just kind of, nudging and catalyzing, product placement, but, just kind of innovating and pushing those conversations forward. And then absolutely, interesting things begin to happen. But still, I feel like we're still not even scratching the surface at this point. I think still early days, where we need to kind of figure out more systems, better systems that can kind of, as like in a very systemic, predictable, probabilistic kind of way, churn out these results. And as they begin to do that, then you're looking at business models, and then you're looking at, this becoming like a product. But right now, I think we're just kind of enjoying the serendipity as it happens.
No, that's very interesting, and I'd like to focus on the bit that you mentioned at the end about adding products later, and that's something that Fatima alluded to earlier as well, because co-working model as the basic model is profitable, right? Your unit economics work. And then you have this whole bunch of users available to you, and you want to start selling them other stuff, and that's what co-grow is. Can you share a bit more about what you feel like what you guys are at least have in mind regarding co-grow? And also, you've worked at a venture-backed company before as well, Kareem, but you've seen those pressures to deliver big and those big fundraisers, and when we combined with this space, WeWork comes to mind. And how do you ensure you do not go down that route? I mean, what went wrong there, and how does one ensure not going down, that slippery slope?
That's a question and a half. So with WeWork, as we were raising, we knew that this was the question that was going to come a lot. And so it was simple. We do not buy properties, and I think a lot of the co-working spaces that you'll speak to, at least, I don't know how their business models work, but it would be that you don't buy, we get into really long leases, and then we make sure that those are really like, that work for us. So our unit economics work really well because we're in these long-term leases. One of the things that Collabs has done so far, because we have 3 locations, others have a lot more, and phenomenal ones at that, is that we've looked at type C real estate and then converted it and made it into type A real estate. So our rental costs are lower than a lot of other places, which means our cost of a seat is a lot lower as well. So WeWork's main thing was that they rented or bought really expensive real estate, and then they decided to make that profitable. As far as services go, I think Saad put it beautifully, where you're sitting and you're observing and you're talking to these people, and there's a lot of time. So there's few services that come up a lot. A lot of people will ask you, hey, I'm looking for this kind of talent. So you're saying, okay, this is something that they need. So we formalized a partnership with a couple of people and said, listen, we will just connect you to these people. And we did it for free. And now we're thinking on how do we make this into a product, right? A lot of the companies that sit with us are startup based out of other countries. So they've come over here and they're like, oh, we need to pay our employees, but we have to register a company. That takes long. How does the tax work? How does this work? So we're like, oh, hey, hold on. We'll do it for you. And then you turn that into a product, right? And this comes up again and again. And a lot of the times in co-working spaces, because it is, I used to hate using the term family because nobody's really your family, but it does kind of become a family. They yell at you when, the infrastructure breaks down, which it breaks down. But they also really appreciate you. So you get tons and tons of data. And at the end of the day, everyone wants data. At one point in time, we're thinking, okay, how can we use this data to do better? How many people are walking in? How many people are walking out? At what point in time are they doing something? So that's an interesting aspect. But I'd be repeating myself, and Saad put it a lot more eloquently, that a lot of the products that we're going to come up with or we've thought of have come because of the need that has arisen. And I know Mannan, right, put it really beautifully, that co-working exists because this is a problem. Office space, so I was working at Keep Truckin', it's a unicorn, and they had like such a big real estate team that managed the office. There's 2,000 people, I'm managing 2,000 people, and every day as the GM or the head of Pakistan, I'd get like, oh, the generator's not working, do this. You're right, that's absolutely right. And if we take that pain away, we're taking a major pain away. And I'll preempt your question and tell you, as we go towards difficult times, or we go towards an impending recession, co-working, for all of you sitting listening to us, would be the best place, whether it's Popcorn, Kickstart, Daftarcorn, because we know how to do this, and we know how to do this well at a cost which will be affordable for you. Getting your own office is really going to be a difficult proposition. It requires a whole new team. It requires a whole new set of costs that you have to bear, and all the infrastructure that you have to get. So come to either one of us. And also, one last thing, I love that we have so many co-working spaces. I feel like if it was only collabs, I would be so lazy. I would not be getting up first thing in the morning looking at, ooh, what is Daftarcorn doing, Popcorn doing, or Kickstart doing? And their content, when it's better than mine, does not make me hate them, maybe a little, but it inspires all of us. And I think that's how all of us think. And if somebody's coming to us and I literally don't have space, I swear, I say, okay, Daftarcorn's this facility or Kickstart's that facility would work really well for you. And I think there's so much space in Pakistan, and I think as we go forward, co-working is the way to go, just because it is more cost effective and better for the economy, by the way, and sustainable. I think we should all work together and see where we can take this. And honestly,
so you all will co-work in one building?
You say I can't hear you.
Should have all the co-working spaces together.
That would be
create
awesome.
this cartel.
I
Co-working
think you all should co-work in one building.
Yes.
And then grow that.
All of you doing an amazing job.
No, absolutely. I actually think the space is quite vibrant. The scenario is not as vibrant in Karachi. Unfortunately, we just have one, but thankfully we have that one. Sure, but coming back, I want to speak to Mannan and Wasay as well about this. How does it differ managing the culture of your organization in a co-working space? Is it the same as an office, which is entirely your constrained domain? You have control over the whole space. You have control over everyone who comes there and how they behave and how they operate. Does that impact or does that change when you're in a co-working space where, say, you want a certain value to be instilled within your team and literally behind that glass people are of the opposite value? Has that been a struggle or has that affected your ability to instill a culture?
Culture के ऊपर तो मैं काफ़ी देर बोल सकता हूँ, but interesting. So big brother तो नहीं होने वाला. We can't be monitoring our people all the time. When within our own building, I've often walked into a room and someone's watching Netflix, games are being played, etc. We have to trust people, which means that they need to get work done. Engineering की बात हो रही है, at whatever time is required, right? Someone manages that. So if that was part of the question, that's out of the way. The second question, as I understand, is that I may want our team to sort of say हमारी एक value है अखलाक, right? I may want them to sort of practice that, whereas there may be another team there जो उसको नहीं करी. So what's your question? Have we had issues with that?
No, does the fact that you're in a co-working space, does that affect that? और उसके अलावा भी थोड़े perks भी होते हैं जो थोड़े different होते हैं, right? कुछ organizations से, and then he's like, यार देखो वहाँ पे तो हमें उन लोगों को तो
exactly, right? So जो perks वाली चीज़ है ना, that doesn't stop. You don't get to a point and say, yeah, this is done. These guys are going to keep competing. Companies will keep competing year upon year upon year, which means that as someone who's running a company, I'll need to keep getting back to those conversations, right? So एक तो उससे निकल गए, you let these guys compete, वो value prop बेहतर होती रहेगी. Culture के लिहाज से it hasn't been a problem. You've just made me think about this. So that's a good one. But I think if going forward, so with Saad, in Saad's case, Saad and I met a while back, right? I think you only had one location then. Yeah. And what I did align with was culturally and values-wise, we aligned with Saad. So I think that assurity was there, and I mean, I spoke about what things we'd hesitate about having we were very particular about. And so I think वहाँ पे अगर alignment हो with whatever culture sort of a company aspires to, तो फिर वो issue नहीं आना चाहिए. And these guys have rules, I'm sure all of them do, right? You have to sort of sign this. Each user of a shared workspace has to sign this long agreement that this is how I'm going to behave. So perhaps that defines that minimum bar, if you will.
Okay, that's interesting. Wasay, and then I would like the panel to chime in as well. What are you guys doing about making these spaces more inclusive? Making them more comfortable, safer for women, making them more comfortable, safer for working mothers, for disabled people. Are there any particular initiatives that you guys are taking when you say identify real estate, etc.? We'd just love to hear your thoughts around how you guys are thinking about the future.
Okay, perfect. Hello.
Yeah.
So it's working. So making the co-working spaces inclusive, what we opted for was that people were already working in the co-working spaces and everything, but we started conducting the market research and we found that still people are not working in the co-working, but they're sitting in different coffee shops and they're just doing their work and everything like that. So what we came up with was Spaces by Popcorn. And in this, what we did was that we onboarded different coffee shops. We have around 30 coffee shops right now with us. So people usually go and sit in the coffee shops, but after 2-3 hours, the waiter is always pinching you. You want to order something, you want to order something. Then they go away. So people weren't able to sit there for long, like 7 to 8 hours. So what we planned was that we opened spaces, and in this what happens is that a person comes and signs an agreement, and for example if a person is going to sit in Mocha, so they're going to go and sit in the Mocha cafe and they can work there like co-working space, but there are certain criteria that they have to follow. Sometimes if people are getting bored sitting in popcorns like 3-4 locations that we have in Lahore, so they can go and they can sit in these coffee shops. It's going to give them a different environment, and that's how you can make inclusive for them. Similarly, coming towards the daycare thing, currently in Popcorn we don't have their daycare thing, but sometimes we give customizations to the people. So we had this company that is sitting in Defense Phase 5 branch, and the mother was like that, my kid is at home with the maid and I don't trust her, blah blah blah. So what we did was that we allotted her room to her, and if you're gonna visit the Phase 5 branch someday, you're gonna see that there are a lot of toys and balls and everything like that in the center. So literally the employees, the engineers are working around the corner and the kids are playing in the middle. Like she has a daughter and a son, and they're like 4 and 6. So it also creates a good community, like people literally from the offices from different floors, they're coming and playing with their kids. So I feel like in future we're going to focus on the daycare center as well, because it's a really good thing for the mothers, because they're usually like scared about what the maids are going to the kids, blah blah blah. So we're going to focus on that, and the coffee shops that I talked about is something inclusive that we're doing right now.
Papa wants to add it.
Yeah. So when we think about inclusive and diverse, we said we would lead by example. So our team at Labs is extremely inclusive and diverse. And diversity in Pakistan usually means, male, female, but we also have people from all different environments. So that's one thing. And the second thing that is, we have a lot of rules. Every one of us will have rules, but we're very relaxed about certain rules. And yes, sometimes they get broken, but we have a very strict harassment / anything that comes close to harassment, or anyone doing anything that looks close to harassment. One community member to another, our team to another, or team within team. And I'm very, very strict about it. So is everyone else. So we've, mashallah, not had any incident there. As it comes to daycare, there is some surprises in store. I am not allowed to talk about them, but yes, that is something that we're definitely thinking about. However, it is a big responsibility. So we're looking at how to make it not such a big responsibility, but I believe that that should be the case. And yes, some of the spaces do allow kids in, and it's really lovely to see. We are not as good on how accessible our buildings are, but that is one of the projects that one of the person in our team is now looking at, because I think we need to make them accessible for differently abled people. I have my sister who's differently abled, and when she came to Collab, she had a tough time walking around. So it's really important to look at that. I'm not proud to say that we're not there yet, but that is an initiative. But the rest of it, it's just about making sure that you lead by example, that you show that we are a diverse team with all people in there, and then making sure that there is enough representation of every different kind of diverse group, so that people in your community can reach out to you and they can see that this is happening. So that's what we're doing, but more on that as and when we announce.
We can include her. She'll come on the stage.
I think that's time for Q&A.
Yeah, exactly. She's dying to ask a question. If anyone else wants to chime in, and then I'll just open it to the floor.
I just like to
you should
add
go
on
get her.
something.
We were just talking about this. You should go.
Yeah.
We should get a picture taken.
But just to kind of, add on to what Mannan was talking about as well, and to answer your question too, I feel like if we step back for a second, if we talk about culture, or if we talk about, differently abled people, we talk about minorities in general as well, I think we've learned a lot. And again, I think the beauty of the model Joke is, I guess, somewhat circumstantially wo ho gayi, and then we kind of rediscovered it and re-engineered from it, was just kind of trying to foster that community, which was as pluralistic as possible, and then kind of working back from there, because we host a bunch of these people that we've learned so much from, Def Talk, and their brilliant team in Islamabad, Connect Here, they're in and out all the time, doing fantastic work, obviously, coming out of Nest.io, and a bunch of other people as well, and working moms, our families, friends, cousins, as we're all, kind of moving along in life as well, all sorts of different types of requirements. But fundamentally, if you kind of boil all of that down, we've started from a very, like, I think both of us, all three of us actually, from a very, very modest, very small space, very, very tentatively. And we like to think, we might be extremely deluded, but we might like to think that some essence of the space has remained the same. Regardless of, we've just crossed 100,000 square feet this week, but when we started with that initial 1,800 square feet with just 20 people, that and now we just try to kind of stay very, very focused on the fact that exactly like what are the values, and then not just kind of stick them up on the wall and say like integrity, honesty, blah, whatever, right? But like actually how does that permeate into your marketing, into your sales, into who you're bringing in? Like, you know, you might say no or whatever to a very, very high paying client because you might have some cultural repercussions on the space if you bring them in. Might be extremely lucrative. Those are extremely hard decisions. And I feel like, you know, like culture is more about what you say no to and like, you know, the harder decisions that you take when times are tough. But also like, I feel like one thing that we've really personally benefited from and that we feel has really kind of paid dividends in terms of like how they pan out and how they manifest is like a very close link of these cultural values and of like being pluralistic and how does that play up with design, right? And design in the sense of where you are, where you're located, when your user or your community member is reaching your site, how are they getting there, what time of day, what time of night is okay, what is not, is that acceptable, not acceptable, and then when you get there, how do you design those spaces in a way that, you know, enterprise clients, great companies like Tintash and all of these other guys who are doing phenomenal work and have been at it for so many years, they also have their comfort and their culture and their privacy, but also they're also part of like the bigger positive things of the space as well. Like it offers that security by design as well, it offers that accessibility by design as well, and I feel like that really kind of plays a part because even when a user kind of steps into your space, they might not like, you know, first 5 minutes of interaction or, you know, first 30 seconds or whatever, they might not be able to kind of articulate or pinpoint that this is what you're doing, right? But they feel it and they know it, and that is what they kind of mimic as well. Like, you know, the kind of demeanor you have, how you're designing the spaces, where you're putting what and how they're flowing through the space and what other people are doing as well, that kind of really sets the tone. And if you do that right, like, you know, everything just kind of
that's actually a very, very interesting perspective as well. Unfortunately, we've run out of time and we won't be able to open this to the floor, but if anyone has any questions, the panelists will be right here, right after we end this right now, and you can just ask your questions directly. But thank you very much for joining us today, guys, and thank you so much for sharing these important perspectives. Thanks a lot. That's it for today.